Welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, your franchise guide. And today we have a very special guest. Today we are speaking with Neil Parekh. Neil is the founder and CEO of Made This franchise, the first ever US-based cleaning franchise specializing in short-term rental cleanings. Neil has generated almost $10 million over the past 5 years while running his local business completely remote while traveling the world. That's pretty impressive. I definitely want to know more about that. Now he's on a mission to help other owners achieve the same freedom through the Made This franchise, a work from home anywhere franchise concept. Neil, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Just happy, excited to be here.
Yeah, it was actually on for everyone listening in on Neil's show earlier in the week. Every time we talk to one another, we're always bouncing ideas off one another. I always learn something new from Neil. So being on the franchisor side, but yeah, I'm looking forward to this. So
likewise, I feel like it takes forever to actually get to the record button because we're just bouncing business ideas off constantly. Then it's like, oh, hey, we're here to actually record a podcast. All right, let's go.
We should do it. We should just hit record in the very beginning. So just share, right? Just share me rambling on about stuff. So, as we mentioned in the beginning of the show, you know, a lot of corporate executives listening in, first-time business owners or aspiring first-time business owners. If you could fill us in a little bit about, you know, your journey, how did you get into business ownership, and what's the overall journey look like?
Yeah, sure. So I used to work in corporate as well. Worked in finance. I worked for a private equity company for about 4 years. So we were doing tech private equity, and I was liking it. I just wasn't fully fulfilled, right? There was nothing wrong with the job. I kind of felt like I wanted to do something else, that I really shouldn't be there. And, you know, you'd kind of see, as the old saying goes, you see the guy at the corner office, and if that's not who you want to be, you better get out of there. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how it was for me. And for me, what I wanted a couple of things. One, I wanted to just quit my job and travel. You know, I had this dream of just backpacking for a year. The other part is I also wanted some sort of side income for my parents. You know, they had the old video rental store, Giuseppe. Do you remember those, like the Blockbusters?
Yeah.
So, you know, this is mid 2010s. They weren't doing that well financially at the time. Right. They still had them open. So I just wanted something to help transition them over. So I was trying to search for a lot of different side hustles and came across the idea of Made This, which is a cleaning company, or a local cleaning company. So launched that, started to work. And then 2 years after doing a side hustle, I quit my job and booked a one-way flight to Colombia, started traveling and building Made This.
And we're jumping the gun, but I wanted to hear your interesting fact. But that was an interesting fact about yourself. So I thought that was really cool, and you were able to launch a business. So that's awesome. During COVID, right? Technology took over. Zoom calls. I think I did maybe 1 or 2 Zoom videos prior to COVID. Now I've probably done 1,000 or 10,000. I lost track. Or StreamYard, or all these types of video conference. Talk to us a little bit about, you know, remote working. What does that mean? Because there seems to be a little confusion. I know when I speak with candidates looking at franchises, I want to be remote, but what does that actually mean? Does that actually mean I'm doing business in my market, I'm not ever leaving the house, I'm running it off the laptop? Tell us maybe what remote working is to you, and talk to us how that kind of relates to Made This.
Sure. And that's a good question. I never really had to think about it in detail until, you know, you asked that. And I know we talked about it a little bit on my podcast.
So I caused the confusion then.
Right? Yeah. Which is actually really good, because I think there's like, what remote means is so different and unique to every different person. Right. So we'll talk about some terms. There's remote, there's location independent, there's full on digital nomad. You know, there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice it. So I think remote, when most people think about it, is they don't need to go into the office. That doesn't mean they should be in a different country or city or town. Like, they could still be in the same town, but they don't need to go in anywhere. I think that's what most people mean with being remote. When I think about remote, I think about, hey, you should be able to work from wherever in the world you want, as long as there's Wi-Fi, right? As long as there's actually good internet, which can be a problem. That's kind of what I think about being remote and being truly location independent. And it really just depends on what the goals of the person is, right? Let's say there's someone who's going to buy into a system who has a family and he says, I just want to make sure I'm home at times to be able to take care of things at home, but still work. I don't really want to go travel. That's fine. I think that's still remote. You know, there could also be other people who say, I want to bounce around a lot and explore places while still working a full-time job. That's also remote. I guess it's just a little bit different type. Giuseppe, how would you how do you think about the differences in like what people are actually looking for? I'm sure you talk to people all the time. You say, I want remote. And that word is so variable. Like, what have you seen as the different segments of being remote?
Yeah. So one thing I've done, and I'm learning, based off of our conversations, I've had other guests on, and we've touched on this topic. One thing I've learned to do is just basically ask the person on the other phone and ask them, what do you mean? What does remote mean to you? And that opens up a lot, because to your point, it may be, I'm literally running my business from my laptop. I don't have to leave my apartment or my house. Other cases, kind of like, digital nomad, running, living all over the world, traveling. And others, it's, I live in New Jersey. I run my business in New Jersey, but once it's up and running, I essentially have my employees going to the customer. I am essentially running all the marketing, the CRM, everything on my own, and my employees are going, B2B, B2C. So I think it's, to your point, it's almost different levels, and you can't assume people understand exactly what remote is. So when I get that, I want to be remote, I'll step back and say, what does it mean to you? And the time frame, because some people almost want it to be set up immediately. This is a remote business, which is more like the Made This, the Made This franchise, versus maybe a business that we have that's in mosquito spraying, where it's a digital platform. Everything is done digitally. They have online marketing, yada yada yada, and the technicians are going out spraying while you're running the business from a cell phone and a laptop. So in your local, preferably in your local market. So there's different, it kind of varies, but there's some training. So there's some hands-on until you're able to back off maybe after the first several months. So you are kind of hands-on, you're doing a little bit of training. So I guess no right or wrong, it's more of preference and what people are looking for.
There's something I'm thinking about too, as it relates to being remote. There's a couple ways to do it. Like first, you can look at the business model. We talk about, let's say, mosquito spraying or Made This, where technicians go from their home straight to the job site and then back, where you could technically be behind a computer, kind of quarterbacking the whole thing. Another way to be remote is to buy into a system which is kind of large enough where there's a built-in manager from the get-go. Think about McDonald's, right? Typically, the owner is not the one flipping burgers or even managing day-to-day operations. There's some fast food places where that is the case, but let's say I'm using the McDonald's example. Maybe that is the case of McDonald's. I don't really know, but more than likely, the person puts in the money, and as part of that budget, they have a manager. They hired the manager from the beginning. They're technically remote. They could work from anywhere. They're just managing overall very, very high level. So there's a couple ways to think about it, at least as it relates to the franchise world. You could buy in a bigger place, larger money, invest the money up front to get a manager, or pick a business model which is a little bit more conducive to a quote unquote remote type of lifestyle.
Right. I like that. I like that explanation. And this is one of the many things, it's when looking at a business. I know people that own multiple businesses, but figuring out kind of the characteristics that you want in the business. So to be very clear, anyone we work with, and we've had this conversation with Neil, it's really figuring out what works for you, and then figuring out obviously the franchises that work for you, and Made This may be the perfect fit for you. So do a little kind of figure out what the business looks like, what's your skill set. And then having the conversation with the franchise company, someone like Neil, and figuring out, obviously, is it a good fit? Is my area available? That kind of thing. And this is my kind of what I'm looking at to expand my 5 or 10 year vision. So having these conversations, a show like this is really good just to kind of give you an idea of what's out there. And then, going directly, you're not going to learn this online. You're going to have these conversations directly with the franchise companies, and Neil will be able to provide all that insight as to, who is that ideal candidate? Who is this good for? So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just, I actually really like the idea of the person who's inquiring, mapping out what they actually want in terms of business, their skill sets. I typically always ask, what is it you want out of your life first? Because I feel like you should be able to reverse engineer how you want your life to be, and then you could pick the franchise system or business you want to get into based off of that. For example, remote is one of them. If you see your life in the future, say, I really want to be remote, you better limit yourself to those type of concepts which will lend themselves to that. Now you should think about, how much income do I need? Do I just want to replace my current job? Do I want to make $1 million a year, within 1 year? There's different models which can support that. right? For example, like Giuseppe, you might know this better than I, but I know, like, for example, Topgolf. I think it's like a $3 million investment to get into Topgolf. It's something crazy, right? But people who want to get into that are probably thinking much bigger, and they want to make a much higher amount of cash flow. And that's a different mindset than someone who says, I want to be remote and I want to, enjoy my work-life balance. So I would say figuring out your lifestyle is probably equally important to figure out your skill sets, because that's going to help you decide what type of business model you want to get into.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one advantage of franchising, is that if your goal is to make, I had a gentleman say, I need to make at least, to transition full-time for my job, I'm looking to make at least $250,000, I think was his number. And I said, well, 250 owning a business and 250 as a W-2 employee are two different things. There's so many more tax benefits, plus the appreciation of the business if you own the asset, the building, or wherever you're at, if it's a brick and mortar. And having that conversation, I'm not going to have that information, but contacting the franchisor, some franchise companies will give you an item 19, right? An earnings claim. In other cases, even if there is an earnings claim, you want to continue with due diligence and just asking the franchisor how many franchise or territories, if it's territory based or if it's brick and mortar, how many locations do I need in order to obtain my goal? And it may be 2 or 3 territories or locations, but the franchise companies will be able to provide that information to you, and you'll have the opportunity to speak with the franchisees and just say, hey, were these numbers realistic? The investment, what I made and things like that. So we could talk for days about that. But I don't want to take the spotlight off of Neil, and I want to really focus in on Made This. So tell us a little bit more about Made This, because we started talking a few months ago. I was really interested in what you do. Tell us a little bit more about what exactly you do and who is a really good fit for the Made This franchise.
Sure. So what Made This is I call it kind of a new age franchise concept, especially a new age cleaning company. So we started in a way where it was remote from day one. That's out of my necessity, because I wanted to quit my job and travel. So I had to build the systems in a way which was very conducive to working remotely. So cleaners go straight from their homes to the job site. In theory, the franchisees and everyone can manage everything remotely. So my personal internal team for operations, I think we're across about 6 different countries. So it's a very lean business model, low cost for entry, pretty much a large focus on digital marketing, online marketing. There's no storefront. So it's what's called a low cost franchise. And the goal is just to find people who understand, in my opinion, that a business is meant to support your life. That's kind of why I created it, is I wanted an engine which supports the kind of lifestyle I wanted. And I feel like that should be at the forefront. So typically the ideal franchisee is someone who probably is working in corporate and looking to get out, kind of like I did, wants to start a side hustle and feels more secure in the side hustle before quitting the job and transitioning over to the full-time hustle. Probably someone who has enough pain in their existing job to say, I really want out and I want to do something, I just don't know what. That's the ideal candidate, because that's literally what I did, right? It's copying that exact same formula. It's something brand new. So that's typically, I think, the people who gravitate towards the model. People understand the lifestyle focus of it. People understand the lean aspect of it, kind of the new age aspect of what we're doing. We're focusing on, it's remote work. We're focusing on Airbnbs as well as residential, but a lot of Airbnbs too. So a little bit of the new kid on the block as it relates to cleaning franchises.
Oh, cool. Hey, we all have to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
As an emerging brand. So I wish we can all start out with thousands of locations, but it's an interesting concept. So territory wise, so how does that work? Do you carve out number of households in an area? If you can fill us in a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Ours is based on households. So it depends on the size of the place and how many households. It ranges anywhere between, let's say, 100,000 to maybe 200 or 250,000 households per territory. In comparison to, let's say, like a Molly Maid or something, which gives, I think, like 49,000 per territory. We get pretty large territories. I want every franchisee to have a lot of room to grow. So it's based off of territories, and we analyze both number of residential households as well as rough data on number of vacation rentals in that territory.
And how did the business fare during COVID? That's a question I get a lot with COVID. A lot of businesses had to pivot. A lot of businesses had to kind of change your business model or go, use technology as much as possible.
Yeah.
How did you fare, or what were there any changes during COVID?
Yeah, sure. So, vacation rentals got hit hard, right? So we were probably 75% revenue vacation rentals, 25% residential. And vacation rentals, people are not traveling, reservations get canceled, they don't need cleanings anymore. Luckily, we are a very lean business model. There's not a crazy amount of overhead. Our staff is very lean. We could scale up and scale down. So we never went in the red on profitability. We lost revenue because a lot of cleaning just got postponed. But we redeemed an essential business, never had to shut down. A lot of our focus ended up shifting on residential, especially in places like Los Angeles. Everyone's moving out all of a sudden, right? They're like, I'm going to go to the countryside. I need to move out cleaning. So even though vacation rentals and regular residential cleanings might have stopped, all of a sudden there's an uptick in people who need the cleanings for move outs. So we kind of sustained ourselves that way. Still went down in revenue, right? Because there's not a lot of activity as much going on, but still we're profitable month over month. So kind of just our mentality was, let's weather the storm. We know we're lean. It's not like we're running out of cash, nothing like that. So just weather the storm. And at the end of it, kind of what we discovered is that the residential market's pretty awesome too. And we know how to tackle it. We know how to get scrappy with it. So right now, within the corporate locations is probably a little bit more skewed still towards residential versus vacation rental. And it just depends on the season as well.
I like that. No, I like that. With any franchise, one the secret sauce, as you mentioned, it's exactly what I say. We reverse engineer the process, and there's a lot of things. So it's not just what I want and the characteristics of the business, but I look at the skill set of the person. And then I even take a further step back and say, what the heck do you want to do on a daily basis, both personally and professionally? If you want to be surfing all morning and then just run the business in the afternoon, or what does the average day in the life of a Made This franchise look like?
Yeah, very, very good question. And it depends on what stage of the business you're in, whether you're managing the labor force yourself or you're picking up customer calls, so you have someone to do that already. Let's say you start at the beginning. A lot of it's going to be facing a computer screen, right? That's pretty much what it is. So you could work from anywhere, really, as long as you're connected to Wi-Fi, could pick up the phone in front of a computer screen. So typically the idea of franchisee is somewhat tech savvy. You're not coding or anything like that, but there's a lot of different software systems we use to talk to each other in order to make the experience very seamless for the customer and for the cleaners. So you have to be able to navigate those software systems. So day in the life, initially might be picking up customer calls, doing phone sales, right? Customers call in, say, I need a cleaning. You give them a quote, run them through the process, convert them to recurring. If it's residential, it's Airbnb. A cleaner might call in and say, hey, I'm at the job site and the client's not picking up the door. What do I do? You kind of troubleshoot that part. As you scale and grow, you're going to have someone to pick up those calls, and you're mainly going to oversee that and make key decisions for both. Then afterwards, it might be customer complaints to handle, or team meetings and growing from there. But a lot of it, in theory, all of it should be being able to be done over your computer, right? I don't want anyone on the job site actually scrubbing unless they absolutely need to. That's not the goal, and that's not the ideal person to be running Made This franchise.
And I guess the final question, which is the question that I get probably on a daily basis, is I want to keep my job, or I want a semi-absentee opportunity so that I have the flexibility, or I can keep my job at least to get started. Can this be run as a semi-absentee? We'll say 20 hours a week.
It's funny. I actually want people to keep their job at the beginning. Why? Because it's the type of business model where it's not like you open up a McDonald's or something, brick and mortar, and right at the gate you have a ton of customers, you have to manage them. It's not like that. I think cleaning in general and home services is kind of a slow burn where you have to build up that recurring customer base, and then it compounds over time because it's a very recurring focused business. But at the beginning, there's just not as much to do after you get it set up until we really start to rocking, right? So I actually would prefer people to keep their job, then take the cash flow from the job, whatever excess income they have, and invest it back into the business. The best way to do it is if you budget for this, you could actually have someone at the get-go picking up phones for you, answering cleaner calls for you, so you could kind of stay in your job a little bit longer. The goal is for you to be able to quit your job, though. If someone says, I just want this as a side hustle permanently, I'd probably say it's not a good fit. Mm-hmm. The goal is to scale it to a point where you feel comfortable with the growth, and then you make the leap and say, all right, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to go do this full time. I see enough traction going. See, I'd say we're a little bit different, where I like that concept of keeping your job, using cash flow from that to fund the growth and sustain yourself.
I love that. I love that because as a franchisor, right, you want everyone to be successful. The franchisees are an extension of your brand, right? Mm-hmm. They're an extension. You're making money, obviously, on royalty payments and franchise fees and things like that. But it's extremely important, in my opinion, being on that side temporarily to kind of have that, excuse me, that franchise kind of avatar, right? Who does well in this business? So we have certain businesses that are owner operator. You have to be an owner operator. If you're doing it on the side, it's not going to work. They just won't accept you. They'll just tell you in that first call, that what I call that two-way interview. So it is really nice to know where it works, who does well, and to be upfront. And I think that's huge. That sets you apart from other franchise companies, and it really helps in defining, who we are looking for and who does well in the business.
Giuseppe, do most franchisors require someone to go full-time from the get-go?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know about most, but there are numerous. So there are numerous franchises franchise companies that have some semi-absentee owners, but realize the owner operators from day one do much better. And then they make that kind of some of them make it as a requirement. Others will say, just so you know, most of the owners are owner operator. If you want to run it semi-absentee, there's a very small, maybe it's 10%. And we only have maybe 10 people that you can speak with versus the owner operator. Okay. But they do have that type of ownership in mind over the years. They've kind of figured it out, who does well, who doesn't. So they kind of, but just to keep in mind too, the owner operator means full-time initially, and they're only requiring typically 6 to 12 months out. And then after then, maybe hiring that general manager or scaling back, but they just want that owner operator involved the first year, calendar year business to get it up and running.
And Giuseppe, what are you defining as semi-absentee? Is that permanently, like it's always semi-absentee from the get-go always, or what does that mean?
When we discuss semi-absentee, people have started out as owner operators and then scale back. But when we look for, when someone comes to me and says, I cannot leave my job for the first year, then we need to go to businesses that thrive with semi-absentee owners, where the owner it's an executive model. They're working on the business, overseeing the financials and the marketing. There's going to be more hours up front, hiring your staff. If there's a location involved, finding that location, but it's semi-absentee in the very beginning, giving that franchisee the option once they're able to leave their job. Now they can say, okay, I want to expand my territory. I want to add a brand, or I just want to transition full-time into the business and then just really do a phenomenal job and kind of overseeing everything and expanding the business. So when someone comes to me as semi-absentee initially, that will rule out these owner operator type of businesses, which is fine, because we're, in our business, we're kind of consolidating or trying to narrow down 4,000 franchise companies down to 2 or 3 great matches.
So someone says remote semi-absentee, that is the most vague statement for you. You're like, all right, let's define remote, let's define semi-absentee, and then we'll get to the bottom of what you're looking for.
Yeah, it's a long conversation, because in the past, semi-absentee meant 20 hours. And years ago, when I first started doing this, we didn't define when those hours were worked. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
So I'm like, when, and then, we were having the conversation. I go, well, is it 2 hours a day, or is it 4 hours a day? Monday to Friday, that's your 20 hours. And they said, no, I can't work. I work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. I'm going to work 10 hours Saturday, 10 hours Sunday. And that, again, if that is the only flexibility they have, that really makes it kind of narrow down that search of franchise companies that will allow it. Because if business is being done Monday to Friday, we need to figure out which franchise that will work for. And that you learn from having those, one-on-one conversations with the franchise companies. So there's a lot lot of follow-up questions and diving deep into all these questions.
No, thanks for that. And I guess for everyone listening, we're what's called an emerging franchise operation. We're brand new, and I'm newer to the franchising space. We have a couple locations already, but we've been around since 2013. Just started franchising this year. So a lot of these questions I have for Giuseppe is like, I will pick his brain whenever I can because he knows so much about the franchising space. So based on what you're saying here, Giuseppe, I guess we would be defined as remote semi-absentee, technically, even though the definition, I feel like semi-absentee probably has changed quite a bit recently.
Yeah, I liked it, and it could change. And I tell people in the very beginning, it's going to be a lot more than those 20 hours a week because you are, finding your employees and the locations and things like that. So there's some flexibility. It has to be 20 hours and then you drop off. We're just looking to maybe balancing another business or balancing it with a job. Some people like to transition and finish out the year. So really need to kind of figure out what works best for you. And that's the whole thing, right? Finding the franchise or the business model that works for you. So there's no hot franchise. There's no is emerging versus is emerging franchises better than established franchises? There are differences. Again, it's what works best for you. Is it remote? Is it brick and mortar? Again, what works best for you? And I think what works best for you, if you figure all that out, that's going to be the business that is the most profitable because it's going to be sustainable. It's not a fad. It's something that you're going to be doing for years to come. And have that vision. Don't just have a 1-year vision. Have that 5 and 10-year vision. And everyone defines success differently. If you agree with that statement, some people are looking to make millions of dollars a year. And for yourself, you were able to travel 5 years abroad. That's pretty damn successful to me.
Yeah. Thank you. I agree. At least I really like this statement of everyone defines success differently. I think people who are saying, hey, what franchise system can I make the most money in? That's the wrong question because you're going to get burnt out if you're doing something you don't want to do. And that doesn't support the type of life you want. You're absolutely going to get burnt out. But if you're doing something where it's a grind, but it's something which is in line with your vision of what you want your life to look like, then you're going to be able to power through it. And then you have a much better chance of success there.
Could not agree more. It's absolutely agree. So there's your answer. Stop researching online. Figure out. I jokingly say that the Bob Ross analogy. Get your blank canvas. Paint it all out. Territory. Is it remote? Where are you located? What do your employees look like? Are they highly skilled? Is it more high turnover where you see a lot more in fast food and things like that? Put it all together. The hours you want to be working. Don't have to worry about how to get there or what the franchise is. That's the last step. Figure all that out. And once you figure that and are very specific, then you can start looking at franchises versus I look at all the franchises and now I'm starting to change what's important to me to fit the franchise that I'm looking at. So just trying to simplify the process. I think we overcomplicate things in many cases. I did myself, so I'm guilty of it. So I just think it's an overall easier, simpler approach. Anything else you'd like to add about anything going on at Made This, or any advice you would give to that first time that corporate exec that's looking to invest in their first business?
Yeah. So I did the same thing, right? I was working in corporate and I was researching a ton about what to do. I kind of fell into what I call analysis paralysis, where you research so much and you feel like you're being really productive, but you're not because you're just researching, right? So a little bit of action is better than no action. If you see a franchise company reach out to them. Or if you see a business which is not even a franchise and you're curious about it, start it, try it out and see what happens. What happened in my case is I was trying a bunch of different things before coming to Made This, right? I was trying e-commerce, drop shipping, microblogging, just any type of side hustle possible. And finally, I came across a post on Reddit of a guy who started a cleaning company. I was like, okay, I'll try this too. And it just started working. But luckily, I only got to the point because I was like, hey, I'm doing way too much research. Let me just get going. And then you kind of see what is the path of least resistance and you start moving towards that. And that'd be one advice too, is like, hey, I know you're listening to this podcast, but if franchising is not for you, identify that franchising is not for you. I feel like for a lot of first-time business owners, I think franchising is a great way to do it. I spent quite a long time in trial and error because I didn't even consider franchising. I kind of thought franchising would be way too expensive. I don't want to do it. It's not for me. It's an old school way of doing it. But the more and more now that I'm looking into franchising, there's many opportunities which exist, which are not crazy expensive, which can get you to your goals and also speed up your timeline because you're not doing all this trial and error. Like Giuseppe, I know when I first started, I didn't even know how to pay cleaners, right? So like the cleaner would finish the job and I'd say, all right, pull up next to my corporate building. I'd go outside, go to my ATM, get money, hand him cash. And little did I know everyone from my building could see me handing cash to a guy in a car, right? So everyone's like, you're a drug dealer. Right. It's like, I promise I'm not a drug dealer, but I can't explain this because I'm just doing it on the side.
Right.
So things like that, like it just, I didn't know what I was doing, but you could time collapse a lot just by picking the right franchise system. So in short, I guess the message is just do something, right? Just get moving and keep the process going. And if one thing doesn't work, something else will. But it's better than just staying in place and researching.
I like that. That's great advice. And to Neil's point, either you want the business built for you or you want the startup. Here's a little secret. You can start a franchise and your next business can be a startup. I call franchising almost like I think we talked about it on your show. It's kind of like a stepping stone or a springboard where the franchisor, if you buy a Made This franchise, you'll have Neil and his team backing you up, coaching you, helping you get started. There's no, let me pay the franchise fee and sit on my heels and wait for things to happen. So they will, have coaching. There's going to be certain expectations that need to be made. And then things go really well. That may motivate you to, open up your laptop again and pull up that business plan you created 10 years ago. Maybe that motivates you for that. So there's no right or wrong, but the systems have a lot to it. To Neil's point, how to pay someone. Even when I started my business with writing checks, I'm like, do they just print out? Do I need special paper to print out the checks? And my bookkeeper looked at me like, shouldn't you know this? And I go, I've never owned the franchise or how this works. And then, the corporate office said, no, these are the steps. I was jumping the gun. I was so excited to get started. So,
and here's one tip for anyone who thinks, hey, maybe I want to be more entrepreneurial. I don't know if I want to franchise. Look at emerging brands. Because I think when you're one of the first handful of franchisees in a brand, you are going to have more flexibility to be a little bit more entrepreneurial and contribute to that brand. So you might get the itch of going out by yourself, but still being under a franchise brand. And it could be the best of both worlds. I do think there's some people I've spoken to who I say straight up to them, you need to be part of a more established brand who has exactly an X, Y, and Z system that you simply follow and execute, and that's it. And there's sometimes you need people who are a little bit more free flowing, like not going against the franchise system because they're literally buying my mistakes, for example, like they should trust the system. But there are people who I think are a little bit more entrepreneurial and they would thrive well in an emerging brand that's a little bit more fluid.
Wow, I like that. Very, very good advice for everyone listening in. Neil, I be respectful of your time. I know we're at the 30-minute mark, just over here. Anyone has a question or interested in Made This or wants some more information, what's the best way they can reach you?
Sure. You could go to Made This Franchise, MAIDTHIS franchise.com. You could also go to my direct website, neilparekh.com. Message me on there. Anyone who messages me and say you came from Giuseppe's show, I will answer you, help you out as much as I can. So feel free to contact me.
I appreciate that. We will add all that to the show notes. Neil, it's been a pleasure. We have looking forward to our conversations 2 in 1 week and looking forward to talking again, learning something new.
Thanks for having me, Giuseppe.
Thanks, man.
Take care.
Take care.